So today, busy day. Again, the background looks like I'm in my home, but I am actually down at the beach in a bedroom. That's where they stick me in for this. Yesterday when I was on the the Massachusetts radio, the Moneyline Sports Show in Worcester, Massachusetts. I was doing it from the deck, and I was worried that my neighbors down at the beach were going to hear me talking too loud because I talked too loud to begin with. So it's but everybody, other than me giving it all up, it looks exactly the same every time, Coach Dave, right?
Consistency, brother. Consistency.
We have a great guest on today. We're super excited to have him on. Coach Andrew Aurich. He is now the head coach at Harvard University. Harvard. Okay. When me and Derek looked it up yesterday, just to make sure, because I thought I was right, but it was the first university in the United States. And our Jeopardy question for it is number 2 was who? I told you yesterday. Who's number 2? Do you remember?
Which college wise?
Yes. University.
What would we
Second,
say?
After Harvard. Can you name it?
I cannot.
William & Mary. All right. So that was number 2. So and they've had a storied history in football, as a lot of the Ivy Leagues have.
Absolutely.
Coach has had a storied history in the Ivy Leagues. He was with Princeton for a long time. He was with the Tampa Bay Bucks as a coach. He was most recently, before this job, he was with Rutgers. I got to know him a little bit while he was at Rutgers. He was always great with me and handling prospects when I was still coaching a few years ago. And it's really excited to have him on and talk about his program. And after Harvard had this change, they had a coach for a long time.
Long time.
Long time. Coach Murphy had a lot of success. So it's really a great opportunity to talk to Coach Aurich and really talk to him about building for the future. Without further ado, let's bring on Coach Aurich.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, great to have you on, Coach.
Thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely. Taking time out of your busy day. Although I guess you guys go into the kind of dead period now, right? Or
a little bit.
We're live. We're live for a little bit longer. We got a couple camps coming up in July. Yep. So
look, kind of one of the things too.
Gearing up for some summer camps this weekend, actually. So.
This weekend. Oh, awesome. That's fantastic. This Sunday and tomorrow.
Saturday and Sunday. Sunday.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Hitting it hard, Coach. Hitting it hard.
In the stadium, Coach?
Oh yeah.
I've watched the games in the stadium. Now. When I did my when I was an NFL agent for 6 years, I watched a couple of prospects. I think you guys there was a defensive end that we were looking at, and then I think you guys played Yale, and it was the game that we went to, and there was a guy who's now in the NFL for quite a while, a linebacker from Yale that we were looking at. So it was awesome experience, the Harvard Yale game and watching that. It was just literally Derek, second to none. I mean, the atmosphere,
rivalry, man.
Rivalry, and before I let Coach talk a lot more about his background, I remember they had the club, so when the players come out of this is just, my experience. Players went into the locker room, and upstairs, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming they had kind of a meet and greet. They were all in their crimson get up and looking sharp. Went upstairs. I guess they had a meal, met with people, and it was really, really cool atmosphere. And I was lucky enough to be able to experience that. About 7-8 years ago, maybe it was. But it was a really, really cool atmosphere. Coach, talk about your background. I touched on it briefly, coaching-wise. Like a lot of coaches, you really have climbed the ladder and really very fast. Talk about, your coaching experience, your playing experience.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Minnesota. My dad was my high school coach, and he was the head coach at Concordia Academy in Minnesota for 25-plus years. So I kind of grew up literally at the high school, helping them line the fields. We didn't have a babysitter, so during preseason camp, when my school wasn't started yet, laying on all the bags on the sideline. So went off to Princeton, played there, realized early on I wanted to be a coach. So I went back home to Minnesota, coached with my dad for a year, and wanted to get in college coaching as soon as I could. So I ended up at Albright College in Reading, PA, Division III school. Worked for a coach by the name of John Marska, who
great dude.
Took a bunch of young coaches that were fresh out of college and like taught us everything. It was I was an offensive lineman coaching tight ends now there. I didn't know the pass game at all. And he, really defined how, the head coach coaches the coaches. Had a great experience, learned about recruiting, learned about running my own room, and knew at that point immediately this is exactly what I want to do. And got lucky, ended up at Rutgers for my first stint there. And, started as a player development guy and then worked my way up to a graduate assistant. And actually spent 1 year in offense and then 1 year on defense, which was really important to me because I was an offensive guy, played offensive line, and learning defense was really important to where I'm at now, and understanding, defense just in general. And then I had the opportunity to go back to Princeton, coach the running backs for a year, which was an awesome experience. Being around those type of student athletes is just kind of it's just like a different mindset with them, how driven they are, motivated they are, and how much they want to be coached hard. But at that point, Coach Shiano got the job with Tampa Bay Bucks and presented me an opportunity to go down there. And, young coach at the time, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to the NFL. I want to see what this is all about. And had a great experience, learned a ton. I was on defense. I actually, coach talked about me being on offense, and then I made the drive down. And when I got down there, I found out he wanted me on defense. Yeah. So, but it was awesome.
Surprise. Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. The defense coordinator was Bill Sheridan, who I learned a ton from. And it's just like he had a different way of looking at things than as I learned that first year when I was on defense. After that year, great experience, learned a ton, very cool environment. Realized that's not why I got into coaching. Very much a business and very hard to build relationships with players because they could be cut the next day. So I wanted to get back into college and, ultimately ended up back at Princeton. And 2013 was the year, and was part of a unbelievable run there from 2013 to 2019, where we won a lot of Ivy League championships, put up a bunch of points on offense, and I had a bunch of different roles. I was special teams and tight ends coach initially, then I became offensive line coach, recruiting coordinator, assistant head coach. Then I became offense coordinator, associate head coach, and offensive line coach. Continue to add new responsibilities and, progress as a coach. But then when Coach Shiano came back to Rutgers, the goal was to be an Ivy League head football coach. And when Coach Shiano got the job at Rutgers, I knew that I needed to go work for him again because he's the best in the business in my mind. Program building, culture building, schematically, situational football. To me, it was like I can go work for him, and when I get the opportunity to be a head coach, I'm going to be ready to be a successful head coach. So I jumped at it, and it was a challenging 4 years because it was a rebuild again. But felt really good about where they were at when I left, and I know they're going to have a great season this year. And excited to kind of see that thing through for them. Knowing that, there's a lot of expectations going into this year for them. But, this opportunity kind of presented itself, and I wanted to be an Ivy League head football coach. And, there are other jobs in the league that were open, but I have 3 little kids, and to me, it was important that it was a job that had some longevity to it.
Correct.
And if you look at the history of this program, like they've had 3 head coaches in the last 75 years. So this is the type of place that you get the opportunity and you do a great job. You're going to be able to have success and be able to stay there for a long time. So my wife is from Jersey, and this will be new for her because she's going to leave Jersey for the first time and Massachusetts. Yeah. So my wife and kids are going to be moving up after the 4th, so I'm excited to get them up here. I've been doing the drive back and forth a lot.
Oh,
wow.
Coach, God bless you. God bless you.
Yeah, it's been
Oh,
challenging, to say the
95
least.
through
But
Connecticut, that construction will never stop, Dave. Like we
I
both know
completely
that
avoid
very
it.
much.
I go to Merrick Park. I go to Merrick
Oh,
Parkway.
Merrick.
Completely avoid
Oh,
it.
That's
I've
right.
been like
I've learned that
15.
quickly.
I'm a Sacred Heart guy, so like Merritt Parkway, baby. There ain't nothing prettier in the fall than that. I'll tell you that straight up.
Yeah, every time I'd leave Jersey, it would try to tell me to go get on the turnpike, and I'm like, nope,
Absolutely
I'm taking
not.
287
No
north
way,
and let you
baby.
guys adjust.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. That's
Yeah.
it. That's what it is. That's the experience coach coming out.
That's right. That's a
Yeah.
lot of those
Yep.
those recruiting. Many years of driving those things alerted the fastest way to go.
Oh
right?
yeah, and then
You
where
gotta be at
the
a
best
certain place
pizza
at a
shop
certain
is.
certain time. Well, it's really exciting. To hear you talk about taking on the Harvard job, and you talked about the fact that 3 coaches in 75 years. So good, and, in about 9 years when my son comes through, you'll still be there, so that'll be good, and I'll be excited to hit you up at that point. But yeah, he's a quarterback. He'll be a big giant kid. So
hey, with the way recruiting's going now, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody extends an offer sooner or later. Like it's just the way.
I like 12. I know, right?
Yeah,
but
class of 2030.
I know. But we've already told him that I don't care how good you are, education first. And I know a little bit about obviously the Ivy League stuff from I know Coach Serace real well at Princeton. Yep. And and he used to always tell me the different like ways that things can get done if you need things to get done, which I it's really come about in the last maybe I guess 15 years or so because the endowments are so great at the Harvard and Princeton, Yale, and it's one of the great things that they're able to do for players, which enables you to get some like really, really top tier guys, which when I was coming out and I visited Princeton, like it was basically like, hey, here's what you need. You still had to pay, $10,000-$15,000. I took the scholarship because at UConn because of the fact that even though I love the Ivy League schools, I still had to pay something and I needed the money to go for free. So I think it's really cool how the Ivy Leagues, and in particular, obviously, Harvard's one of them that really are able to do some amazing things from that standpoint. Talk about the appeal. I mean, I don't know if I have to even – I know I'm asking maybe a loaded question because obviously there's an appeal at Harvard, right? But talk about the appeal of coming to Harvard and some of the things that in your process, you really just said, this is a place I got to be.
Yeah, I mean, having – recruited against Harvard for a number of years when I was at Princeton, like there's a certain way people look at Harvard that's just a little bit different than anybody else in the Ivy League. The brand name that it has, when I talk to recruits, it's like you realize anywhere you go, anywhere in the world, you're on a street corner and somebody asks you where you went to college and you tell them you went to Harvard, they're going to know exactly what you're talking about.
100%.
One of the most powerful names in all of education in the world. So the ability to be able to get in with any recruit that has the academics that you're looking for, because they're going to immediately consider you. Whether or not that continues, depending on what offers they end up getting, I can't control that. But we're always in the door. Like if we walk into a high school, every high school is going to let us in. And you say, "Hey, I'm from Harvard. Yeah. I'm coming out. Come on in. Come on in."
Here you go.
Exactly. Yes. And then, the success they've had in football here for a long time. Like that may scare away some coaches that when this job opened, like, oh, I don't know if I don't want to follow a legend. To me, like I look at it like they have recruited at a high level for a long time. This roster is very talented right now. Like I get an opportunity to come into a place and take off right from where it's at, as opposed to have to do a full rebuild. And to me, that was appealing. Other people, they maybe wouldn't want that,
that pressure,
the standard to be that high or the expectations to be that high right off the bat. But that did not scare me one bit. The area is really nice. Cambridge is basically attached to Boston, so it's different than even different than the other Ivy Leagues where you're removed from the city or you're directly in the city. So you kind of had the best of both worlds, and I didn't really realize that.
Until you got there.
Been up here as a player and as a coach, I was always at the stadium for the game. I didn't really see the campus. And then, after my press conference, our director of football operations, like, Coach, what do you want to do now? I'm like, can I go see campus? I've never seen it before. Because when I interviewed, they kept me at the hotel and did everything at the hotel. So as I walked around campus, I'm like, oh, I get why recruits wanted to come to this place. This is like,
Right.
Cambridge is a cool city, and there's like an urban feel to it, but you're on Ivy League campus. And if you want the big city, you're 10 minutes away. Jump on the T train right in Harvard Square, and you're right in Boston. So there's a lot of things to like about this place beyond the fact that once you talk to a recruit, you're checking off all the boxes that they're looking for right off the bat, with the academic opportunity, the network that's going to be built for you right away, the internships opportunity, the football success, how you'll be developed, guys being put in the NFL. There's a lot of boxes that get checked off immediately once you get involved with them. So a lot of great things. Obviously,
well,
I'm super
I
excited
always say about
about it.
Harvard, one of the things I always say about Harvard is look at the biggest company in the world, Microsoft. Steve Ballmer. What was he was the CEO there for a million years? He started out as a Harvard football player. It's an amazing thing that Harvard has that's unique over any other place in the country.
For sure.
Derek,
for sure.
I think you got a little crinkling going on.
Do I? Is it better now?
Yeah.
Is that me?
No, I think
it's me. It's me. I apologize.
Yeah, it's you. Well, yeah. Talk about the full breadth of academic and athletic experience that a Harvard football player has, because I and this because you've been at Rutgers and you've been around a lot of families, and there's even though you can get in every single door at Harvard, a lot of families that may be good enough to go to Harvard don't understand the Ivy League, how it all works. Talk about the experience and how that process is for Harvard in bringing players in.
Yeah. So are you talking about the recruiting process? Like how they end up ultimately
not
here?
Just the recruiting process, I guess, is my second part question. First part is like, what's the experience like for a player at Harvard? And then the second question is for parents, like, how do you help them to understand what that experience, is and how they qualify for Harvard and all those kind of things.
Right, because it's definitely a unique experience itself, right? In terms of that, just looking at it from recruiting at Rutgers to now obviously Harvard, that's one thing. Like, I mean, even recruiting for difference from Rutgers and recruiting just the Ivy League. But, to me, when you say Harvard's on a whole different, like, that's a different even recruiting pitch than just another Ivy League.
Yeah. So the thing that I have that gives us an advantage here is the experience I had at Rutgers. So what happens a lot in the Ivy League is, these student athletes come in and it's like immediately like, hey, you got this academic opportunity now. We can't mess with that. So, but my experience at Rutgers kind of gave me the idea, like, all right, we can make this work for both. And what I've been explaining to recruits and the guys on the team is like, I want to give you the FBS football opportunity and experience. But we just got to fit it into the academic experience that you're going to have here, because, the biggest difference is, like, we don't have 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. available for our players to get everything they could possibly need to get done as a football player before they head off to class. Like, these guys will have a 9 a.m. class. So it's got to be more segmented. But the reality is, what you need to do to be an elite football player, you can do here. You just have to plan out your day accordingly, because it is going to be more segmented, where I'll get my workout in the morning. All right, I got to head over to class. All right, let me get back over here and get on the jugs if I'm a receiver. Get over here and get some recovery. Stop by and see my coaches and watch the tape. Like, that stuff is all available to them. Just have to be more intentional with your time, because what we'll never do is tell a student on this team, like, you can't major in this or you can't take this class because of football. Like, that's just not what the Ivy League model is all about. It's about being a true student athlete. So there's like a balance that they need to understand. Like, I'm gonna help them be an elite football player, and we're gonna have the mindset of, all right, we're gonna maximize this thing and do as much as we possibly can within the rules, but it's got to fit around your schedule as a student. And the team has a wide variety of majors on the team, and I like it that way because they're choosing this place because of the academic opportunity they have. So you got to make sure that they can fully take advantage of that as a student. Plus all the other stuff that's going on here outside of just their classes. You have world leaders coming on this campus to talk to you as a student. Like, these guys they got to be able to take advantage of that. And as a head coach, that's my job. Make sure that stuff is being brought to their attention, and I'm pushing them to take advantage of that, because it'd be such a waste for you to come to school here and not
100%.
take advantage of that stuff when these people are, they want these world leaders, these powerful people in business. They're coming to this campus and they're right there, and you can literally go sit in and hear them talk. Like, we got to take advantage of that stuff. So outside of that part, the guys here on the team, we've had a 3.4 GPA the last 2 semesters. They put in the work to be successful in the classroom because they understand the academic opportunity that's here. So they already understand how to balance those two to try to maximize their potential in both areas. As far as how you end up here, that process really starts when you're a freshman, because you got to do well in high school right away. It's not like you can just take a year off and have a bunch of bad grades as a freshman and then all of a sudden think like, oh, we can still make this happen. Like, no, they're gonna look at everything. So you got to take care of business right away as a freshman, and then the process, starts a little bit later in the Ivy League. But I'm changing that on our end, because I believe that how Ivy League recruiting has worked for so long is it's been a little bit behind, because just that's how everybody's done it in the league for a long time, and the coaches have been in the league for a long time. But having been at Rutgers and being around Coach Shiano, like, there's a different way of doing things. So I want to get out in front of this thing, because the reality is if there's a very strong student who's a sophomore, who's an elite player, we got to try to get in with him early. And because you get him early, now all of a sudden you can kind of coach him through how he needs to make sure he takes care of his business academically to ultimately be a guy that the school is going to want to accept. So there's a benefit to that. And that's kind of how, our mindset, I got here in March, which is late. So we were kind of late with the 2025 class. That doesn't mean we're doing very well, but the vision for this thing moving forward is like everything's going to speed up. And really, when you get to these summer camps, like, we'll be finding a lot of younger guys that'll be at our camp, because we'll already kind of know about them and have made sure we get them on campus here. Because this campus is unbelievable. Like, you got to get kids on campus here, and they realize, like, just you talked about all the history outside of football, all the history, like, literally on the campus and the buildings and how old they are, and events that have happened there.
Presidents.
Yeah, literally.
Not just CEOs of companies, which obviously there's a multitude, but literally presidents upon presidents that that have gone to Harvard. Obama, JFK. There's a multitude. Obviously, since it was the first university, a lot of the early presidents were Harvard guys, right? So there's so much. It's almost if you're getting recruited by Harvard, you almost have to pinch yourself, because to me, at least that's how I look at it. Like, you have to pinch yourself. It's like, wait a minute, like, the most prominent university in the world. I mean, there's only one other university that in the world that most people probably know about, and that's in England, Oxford, right? And so it's the most prominent university in the world, and they're recruiting you. I thought you brought up a really great point about early recruiting, because traditionally you're 100% right. I talked to a lot of coaches around the Ivy League, and they are usually in the late end. They make a lot of decisions later. And I always thought about, because of the new world where you guys, have the large endowments where you could do some more things for players, even with NIL, obviously. Like, I always say, theoretically, the group that could spend the most money on NIL, bar none in the world, is Harvard, because of the size of their endowment. They could get any player they wanted to. And I'm just obviously that would not be the Harvard way, but I'm just putting that out there as like, that's just the truth of it.
That would get away from the spirit of the Ivy League for sure. Sure.
We have to
slightly, just slightly, just a little
we
bit.
Got to give
that
to. Understandably, we've got to give it to the guy who's building the next big AI project. I get it. I understand, but but theoretically, like that's what people don't realize, and recruits don't realize. I want them to understand, like this endowment allows Harvard to do things. Not obviously academically, they do unbelievable things for students that are the premier students, literally in the world. But as far as from an athletic standpoint, guys that are good enough student athletes, the guy that they want, the guy that you guys grade as like an A+, that has all the things. I know you guys have the number scale and everything, the highest of the scale. That's a guy. So when you talked about early recruiting, I always thought that was – I kind of always thought that it should be flipped. And I think your D1 experience, big time D1 with Chiano really understands that if I could get a kid who's a really good student and kind of cultivate that, enough of those kids, you might lose them to another school here and there, but you're going to get your share of top tier guys because you'll help them, freshman, sophomore year, make sure they stay on that academic route that they need to be on to be able to get there, because that's probably, to me, the hardest thing. Like a lot of times with kids, it clicks at sophomore, junior year. But for Harvard, it's too late. If you had, if you got a 3.0 as a freshman, you're really in a major uphill battle the rest of the way. Yep. So the earlier you can identify that really good player who's a really good student, takes it seriously, and help them through that process, I agree. I think that gives you, you talk about the premier positions, right? Like, your best lineman, your best quarterback, your best skill player, to be able to help those guys get through that process early. So now when they start coming to camps as sophomores, maybe they're already on the right track academically. And now when they come, you're validating, okay, this guy's a good enough player. He's on the track academically. This is a guy we want to go and get all the way through the processes and help him have Harvard. As many of those guys have Harvard in their top 3 all the way through. Talk about that D1 experience and how that kind of really will help you in what you're doing at Harvard.
Yeah. So the way we recruited at Rutgers was definitely different than I was used to while I was at Princeton. And it goes back to what I talked about, how the Ivy League just hadn't really adjusted and moved along in the recruiting. And I think Coach Shiano was even different than everybody else, because the idea was like, we're going to offer less guys because we're going to do our homework on the front end, and we're going to know that we want him and he's going to have a committable offer. And we don't offer and then figure out later on if we actually want the guy. Right. Which to me is a lot different than a lot of schools. But the Ivy League, that's all over the place. So, when I got the job, I'm like, I want to keep the same model. Yes. Is it more work on the front end? Yes. But you ultimately end up recruiting less players because you know exactly that you want the guys that have been offered. And then you build better relationships with them because your numbers are smaller and you can be more targeted with actually communicating with them and getting to know them and them getting to know you. So, and the other part is like the idea that at that level, FBS, Power 4, like spring is really, really important, because up to that point, you have built a board for each position and you have those offers out and you did your homework on the front end. You had the tape evaluated. You make sure they love football. You're talking to people at the high school, and all the stuff you have to do to ultimately the player ends up on my desk as, hey, coach, you got to get on the phone with this guy. We got to get him offered. But like, there are going to be guys that you need to see in person. And in the Ivy League, I felt like it was more of like your area coaches were out and they would, offer the fake offer and then say, hey, you got to come to camp. And then let's figure out when they get to camp if we actually want them. Where at that level, you're going and you're getting the in-person evaluation to determine if you're going to offer them. And now because of that, you get out in front of it. Like, it's happening. It's not just happening here. It's happening in other places. Ivy League, probably not as much as it is here, but like being very intentional with the spring, like, hey, you got to go see this guy because I want to verify these things. So that way we can offer them and we'll be in before anybody else. And instead of him going to XYZ Ivy League camp, Like
right.
we already got our evaluation. We're trying to close them now at an official visit. And
Right.
that's a mindset that's more FBS mindset than it is Ivy League or an FCS in general, in my opinion, how we're doing it. So like,
absolutely.
Again, those 4 years I worked for Coach Yano were hugely beneficial in all areas, and recruiting was a big part of it because I completely changed my mindset on recruiting and how I wanted to move forward with it.
Right.
Yeah,
you know, that's the thing too. Like, you know, that like Coach Shiano, like, you know, he recruits differently than most other coaches, no doubt, bar none. Right. So just the fact that you can, you know, you're already in that mindset of like, all right, this guy, you know, what I'm experiencing for these 4 years when you were at Rutgers is a definitely different way of approaching the whole recruiting thing in the whole, you know, that whole world in general, just because, you know, Coach Shiano does it a specific way, his way. It's worked because I mean, you look at it now, you know, they got a top 5 class in the country. We're not just talking we're talking the country. He landed a bunch of guys in this new era of recruiting, and you know, with these crazy timelines where you got a transfer portal, but you're preparing for a bowl game and all of that. And so those windows have kind of closed. But I think you now taking that experience to the Ivy League, right, will, I think, only just trickle down effect, like you said, and even more guys within the, you know, within the league itself are going to start to probably follow that model, especially if you're going to start landing some guys early and then kind of
right.
go there, right? Like, you know, hey, what works, I'm going to do it.
For
Copycat
sure.
leader, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, and one of the other things I think about too with it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Harvard and a lot of the Ivy Leagues have always approached it like, because they're such an academic central institution, I feel like
these
coaches
guys will come here.
Well, that's one, but the other thing is really that they've been conservative, so they get the quote unquote exact right guys. So what you're talking about is a wider cast early, so you can get to a smaller cast late, so you have the guys way before and anybody else. You're working with those relationships now, so you have that smaller group as early as possible. And I look at that, and obviously Shiano he's done a great job of that at Rutgers, but I think about it like this: Harvard is no different than Ohio State, you know, or LSU or Alabama, in the sense that you have something that every player wants, right? But the mindset was always, we're such an academic school that, you know, we want to make sure that everything is right from that standpoint. And then, oh, by the way, let's go and, this guy fell from here. Let's grab him. He's a really good student. He fits what we want. Whereas the cultivation model, I think, is brilliant, because you are in Ohio State, you are Florida State, you are Alabama, you are Georgia, okay? Because your level of prominence obviously eclipses it academically, but is, when people think about Harvard, you say Harvard, everybody knows, okay? Mm-hmm. Everybody knows what Harvard is. So I think that's it's an amazing mindset. Talk about when you, on your own campus, meaning, because it's different as from obviously it's a fantastic academic institution. As you educate the staff as what you're trying to do, you know, the faculty, the administrators, obviously they hired you because they loved you, and really want you to be there. Talk about what process you have to do with your own staff to help everybody in campus understand what you're doing at Harvard.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's kind of challenging with the Ivy League is trying to figure out how you connect the people on the academic side with you with football and make it part of the recruiting process. And I'm like working through that right now, because that's real important to me, because ultimately, like, student athletes are choosing this place because of that opportunity. So you want to make sure they can speak to people on campus to kind of get a feel for what that's all about. And I don't even necessarily have to think it needs to be
sideline passes for all the top professors.
Hour-long meeting. Yeah, it doesn't have to be, you know, hour-long meetings. It's more just for them to understand, like, hey, this is how it works here. Yeah, and it could, and it's a lot of times these student athletes, they understand what this place is. So it's more like, just give me the layout of like, what are my 4 years going to look like?
Right.
With said major. So to me, it's more what I've been doing is like searching through the website for the people that I think are the ones that would be the right people to be able to connect with the recruits. And
right.
Kind of giving my vision for within the athletic department, kind of giving my vision for like what things we can do differently here with facilities, with sports science to not just look cool for recruiting. Like I'm not caught up in that. It's more about what's going to help them develop more as a football player. And let's get that stuff here because, things are done a little differently at the FBS level. And these are things that we should be using to help our players maximize their potential as football players. And then when they understand that, like I'm not selling them on that for recruiting part. I'm selling it on like, this is going to benefit the football team, but this could also benefit another sport on campus because they'll be able to use this stuff too.
Right.
But ultimately,
just the university in general, right? Like could just benefit the university in general. Like maybe it's something that they haven't seen before, haven't been privy to, and now you can bring that in, and now all of a sudden you got a whole bunch of different departments that it's clicking for, right? And it's just helping out the campus and the university in general, not just sports, right? If you can buy into that, I think now you'll start to see faculty and administration, be more interested in the athletic aspect of it, or the your students athletes, right?
Yep. And then when recruits are here, then you talk to them about like, hey, this is something that's going to give you the experience you're looking for from a football standpoint.
Right.
This is different than what you would get at those other schools because we have a different mindset when it comes to how we're going to be able to develop you as a football player. So like to me, it's more like that. That's more of like an educational piece to like just kind of catch up with the times. And we're kind of where we need to be in that, which is great. So yeah, I mean that's the connecting. I always say across the river because the Charles River runs right through the middle, and you have
it does.
Cambridge on one side, and then you got the athletic facilities on the other side. So like the connecting the two, people on the other side of the river with us is real important. To me, that's a process. Like that's not an immediate thing where it's like I'm the head football coach. It's like, hey, like build relationships and hey,
and then we can start. Yeah, then we can do that. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. It's I wonder if you get because I know it's kind of been a thing when you get like an elite recruit that I don't know, let's say he's a football track guy or a football basketball guy, and he actually is kind of elite at both of those. But obviously, if you went to a Power 4 school and chose a Power 4 school, he's going to have to choose a school unless he's literally like a Heisman candidate, right? So choose a sport unless he's like a Heisman candidate guy, like a Charlie Ward. But is that an appeal for some of the players, the higher level players, the really, really high level players that you have that say, hey, I want, I'm great at football, I'm great at basketball, I'm great at football, I'm great at baseball, I'm great at football, I'm great at track. So, whatever it is, right? Lacrosse. Is that an opportunity? Is that something that players have talked to you about?
For sure. And, I have experience with that with my time at Princeton. And there was a run. We had a couple of really talented football players, but also talented in their other sports. And to me, that's the key. Like you have to be, I'll use track, for example, like you have to score points for the track team at the track meets for it to make sense for you to do both. If you're just saying,
you can't be just a guy.
The track team, that doesn't work. So there is definitely, I'm looking for that, those type of guys, because just like you said, that gives you an opportunity to get a player that maybe wouldn't be considering the Ivy League until he understands that, I can still do both there. And I will be able to do both at these other schools. So that's already come up even since I got here with multiple guys. And I'm fully supportive of that. Some coaches aren't as supportive of it in the football world, but to me, that's one of the benefits of being like a place like this. And I'm willing to work with the other coaches to make it work, because I know that player will have an impact on us winning and losing games in the fall. So it's in my best interest to give him that opportunity to do both.
Yeah, when you have that, and me and Derek break down these 5-star guys, right? And we do, the stuff on them, and invariably they literally are always, right, Derek, like a 2-sport megastar, football, basketball, almost
track.
All of them, right? I mean, it's track, right? Almost all of them are, right? And I think with the right pitch, eventually you may nail one of those guys, and you literally can get a 4 or 5-star that's a very good, really, elite student, that to say, hey, you know what? Like, I guess I don't have to choose. Like, I could actually start on the basketball team at forward or guard, and I'm playing a superstar in the football field, and I think that's one of the beauties that you can have. You can get a super elite prospect, especially identify them early, like you talked about, right? Because you could then say, hey, listen, this is a possibility. You won't have to maybe if you want to give it up, you can give it. You give up one. Yeah. You like one much more, and you do the other one just because you're just a great athlete that play football, right? But if you actually love both, do both.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's I'm excited to kind of have those materialize over time here for sure.
Right, and it's something you can develop, right, as well, because you'll be one of the only ones that's probably doing it that way, or even considering that. And if you can identify that at a young age, get on one of these kids boards before the others, and say, hey, look, this is a track that's possibly for you. Just handle your business. That could be a huge appeal for you, especially with track and honestly, like lacrosse being such a big, more Ivy League like sport, right, where you can get those higher academia guys that do that, and then say, hey, man, like, I know you can play this sport as well. We can help out both, right? And then ultimately, put you in good nature with the other coaches on campus. And now, you have that, you build that relationship in terms of, other faculty and whatnot.
For sure. And that came up, relatively quickly since I got here,
right.
Different coaches, those spring coaches specifically. Hey, what's your thoughts on guys playing 2 sports? Because I'm like, because they know it helps everybody for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, I'm guessing the guy that runs 10-1 and 100 is a benefit to them. So if he could do both,
exactly.
You'd be the first guy I sit with.
Yeah, happy as hell.
I'd be like, listen, I'm recruiting this kid. He's a great football player. He wants to play football. He runs a 10-200. Can we get him to Harvard?
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a couple of things that are really, kind of to the nuts and bolts I'm curious about. And does NIL and transfer portal at all have any effect? And I know Ivy League, for the most part, probably frowns on a lot of the transfer portal stuff, I guess. But is any of that going to weigh into your recruiting? Is there benefits for you in some of those areas?
Yeah, good question. So, NIL exists. It has, the Ivy League has particular rules with it. So it's not how you see it at the FBS level.
Right.
And the reality is that it is need-based grants, financial aid. So, the more NIL you get, the less financial aid you're going to get. Because that definitely plays into it.
So kind of like a scale.
Yeah. So it exists. It's not a subject that even comes up with any guys in the team that I've had. And really in recruiting, it barely comes up other than, you may get a question of like, what does it look like there? And you explain it to them. They're like, okay. And really it's more like, hey, yeah, you could go to this school and get $50,000 a year in NIL, but the reality is your earning potential when you graduate from Harvard is so different that you're not too concerned about that, chump change that you got during college.
Exactly.
Forget about that. So transfer portal is interesting. It's not a big thing here. And the way you should kind of understand it is people get accepted to Harvard as freshmen and they never leave because who's going to transfer out of Harvard when you can get the degree from Harvard? So there's not beds available to fill. And how it does show up in the Ivy League, and it's shown up quite a bit at Harvard, is you get 8 semesters of school in the Ivy League, specifically at Harvard, and like if you don't play in enough games your freshman year, you don't redshirt. Like you don't get that year of eligibility back at Harvard because you're only there for 8 semesters. So what happens is guys will grad transfer. They'll finish their time at Harvard and then they'll grad transfer.
Right. You see a lot of that actually.
Yeah. So we have this class this year, offensive lineman going to Florida State, defensive lineman going to Louisville, offensive lineman going to Eastern Michigan, tight end going to Virginia, DB going to Villanova. And they look at it like, hey, I can get some NIL now. I can get somebody to pay for my master's, and I can continue to play. And if there was question marks with them as far as NFL goes, now they're going to be able to play versus Power 4 competition, so things can get verified for the scouts. But that's not the only path to the NFL here. There's been plenty of guys who have played here 4 years and went to the NFL. And Truman Jones just won a Super Bowl for the Chiefs. He didn't grad transfer. He played 4 years here. Just won a Super Bowl. So that's how the transfer portal shows up here more often.
That's a unique benefit that they get done with their 4 years and they can grad transfer if they wanted to in that last year. So they get their Harvard degree. And then if they're that level, they can go and play FBS and get in front of more pro scouts potentially. I guess you got to get a Kyle Juszczyk and Fitzpatrick NAL fund eventually going there. Those two guys,
they can put together a nice little collective.
Yeah,
I'm sure they could. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Patrick fits in with the Harvard professors with the long beard and everything now, so he fits in really well there from that standpoint. But yeah, no, Harvard is a place that obviously has produced pros. It's one of the things that probably goes into your education process for the top tier players for them to understand. Like, I always said to high school kids that I coached, that a lot of them went on to Ivy League, and I always said to them, those schools and Harvard in particular are truly a 40-year benefit from it. Like a lot of people say, it's not just a 4-year, it's a 40-year, but Harvard really is a 40-year benefit. And it's funny, my son asked me this question. I thought it was a great question. He said, who makes more money in the long run, an NFL player? I know Derek knows my son, so he knows this would come from him. And an NFL player or an orthopedic surgeon. Okay. And I said, well, if the orthopedic surgeon ends up owning his own practice, potentially he will make, unless it's a Tom Brady or somebody like that, like a guy who played forever. But the average NFL player, the orthopedic surgeon is going to make a lot more money than the NFL player. And he goes, huh. He says, well, what happens if you go and you play in the NFL and then you be an orthopedic surgeon? I said, well, that's the holy grail.
Brother. Even better, brother.
That's your goal, son. That's your goal.
Mind you, Coach, he's 9, right? And he's already asking this. So, you may see him on your board in a couple of years.
Based off that question, and yes, I would think so.
Here you go.
I was shocked when he asked me that because I just went to the orthopedic yesterday to get something done for my knee. So he asked me that question. He's like, "Oh, do those guys do really well?" I'm like, "Yeah, they do really well."
You're like, "Yeah, they do fair.
They do very well. They either put me on the operating table or they're giving me something for my knee that costs $2,000. So they do pretty well. But it's really interesting. So from your own experiences, as far as coaching wise, you're an offensive line guy, right? So now that you're coaching, you're the head coach, you're the CEO of the program. What is your kind of day like now?
Yeah.
Great question. So you have a lot more administrative meeting with different people within the athletic department. And that may shrink down as I'm further along in this position, but you have a lot more time to yourself working on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
but I wanted the big thing for me is I want the players to feel like I'm always accessible. And I learned that from Coach Giano, that was real important to him. So I stay out of the offensive staff meetings. I stay out of the defensive staff meetings because those bog you down, and then you're not available for this player who just could not even be a big thing, but he just needs to talk to somebody about it. And your availability is real important because it's going to impact him, and it's going to impact his academics, and impact his football. So he needs to have somebody to talk to and have an outlet. So I want to make sure I'm available for that stuff. I do spend a lot of time on recruiting because I think, my involvement in the recruiting process can separate us from everybody else. So I spend a lot of time evaluating players, talking with parents, talking with recruits, again, building relationships. So I know them well and they know me well. Really sometimes you're putting out fires and different things that pop up and whatnot. But, I try to keep myself busy. By any free second I have, I should be recruiting. That's the way I look at it.
And that's your lifeblood, and that's the difference maker. In I think as a head coach now, it's such, because you're a public person more than any time before. The head coach is really a public face. 20 years ago, those guys can dive in and get into every meeting and still do recruiting, all those kind of things. But now as a public face, that recruiting thing is such an important thing. And it's obviously a 24/7 thing with you probably, when players ask me like, I sent the coach my huddle link. I'm like, you're going to have to do a little more than that. Like, you're going to have to give them a little bit of a profile of who you are, because if you're sending stuff to me, he's getting 1,000 times what I'm getting, so you want to make sure that you kind of do stuff to stand out. So he knows, first of all, that you're, especially at Harvard, that you're a good enough student, obviously, to be a guy that could be a prospect from that standpoint. Obviously that you're a good enough athlete, and that, you understand the process, and that's part of the whole thing, is understanding the process. And I'm sure the kids that are going to be Harvard kids are going to research things a little bit better than maybe some other prospects, just because that's who they are in general. Talk about, just from like spring ball, the difference between like a Harvard football player and kind of what you can put in with them, and how you approach the development of the player from a knowledge-based standpoint. I mean, obviously we know they're going to be really smart guys for the most part. It's not that guys at other schools aren't smart guys, but you're recruiting smart guys, right? So it's you're recruiting guys that are of the highest level of intelligence.
You got to be Harvard smart, man. Like, they're in their own categories. Yeah,
there really is. Talk about what it's like to put stuff in with those guys.
I would say, I tell you the truth, I don't see a huge difference. As far as like who we had at Rutgers versus here, as far as like their football knowledge and their ability to understand offense, defense, special teams. But the thing that I think every college football player needs to have is a pre-snap ritual, because that's where there's always the breakdown. And like on the field, it's showing up that you don't really know what you're doing. And that was something that Coach Schuman talked about in great detail a lot with the team, was having a pre-snap ritual that allows you to know my alignment, know my job, and where my eyes need to be when the ball snapped. So I want that to be the way we do it. And I would say that I've been happy with their ability to pick up the offense. Now, the thing that was real important to me is, how do I make this transition as easy for the players as possible? Because of the fact that it is a very talented team. So I kept the defense coordinator, Scott Larkey. I kept the offensive coordinator, Mickey Fine. Obviously, they've had a lot of success here, which made it a lot easier to keep them. And the fact, as I talk to the players, like, clearly they care about their players beyond just the football part of it. But that made it even easier transition to spring for them, with those guys continuing the positions they were in, and schematically, obviously we're adding wrinkles. but overall, like the system being the same. So yeah, I mean, I thought we did a really good job at Rutgers of getting the right type of kids who football was important to them, and they had this foundation of a football IQ. So that was great at Rutgers, and it's great here. I guess if I had to answer that question, I would say it's been good.
Mickey Fine, I played against in college, and when I was at UConn, he was at Maine. He could sling it. I was always amazed at how Maine would get like good players, but they did over and over again. They would get really good running backs, and they would get enormous linemen. I always say my senior game, I think we missed the extra point to go into overtime, but it happened to be my very worst game as my senior year as a linebacker because they had the largest lineman, and they ran a power offense, counter tray, power. I didn't, and then play action off of it. But I would say that Mickey Fine, oh my God, he's a great guy. But I always frustrated me because I missed the sack on him. They ran play action. I went to light up the running back, and he pulled out went the other way, and I just missed him. He threw a touchdown, and then their big old linemen were just laying on me all day, like pushing me back. I used to use my speed and my athleticism to get by guys, and when they were just coming right downhill, I was so frustrated all day long. But it was so I know McFarland. He's a great coach, was a great player himself. So you have a fantastic staff there, and I guess that's one of the beauties and the appeals of Harvard is that you could probably get a lot of coaches that'll want to be assistant coaches at Harvard and be there and want to put in the time and coach at a place like that just because of the atmosphere. Plus, you guys have Boston right there. I mean, it's amazing for the players from a social standpoint. More universities probably in
family.
Yeah, in Boston, right? Like
I don't know if this number's right, but my landlord, because we're going to rent for a year, he told me there's 68 colleges in Boston. 68 colleges. So you just think about that. There's a lot of college students in this area.
Yeah.
And I came to find out most of our offensive line are, dating girls from other colleges, not from Harvard.
That's what I figured. You probably
that's a wing night thing. They must have figured that out. Like, hey, let's all approach it this way. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's something where they've got piles of, and they're like, yeah, how about you date a girl from this place? I'll date a girl from this. Like, it just kind of, look, and it's also kind of a family atmosphere, right? Like you said, it's city, but it's not city. It's kind of, it probably attracts a lot of coaches with families, right? Because this area and whatnot. And look, if it's for me, like I'll coach there until they tell me I can't, and hopefully I can help get my kids in this area. And because like you said, all those colleges in that area, maybe my kid's not a Harvard person, but like the options aren't so bad here. You're right. Like,
yeah,
so
for sure.
That's definitely an appeal. It's definitely pretty cool.
No, it's definitely a unique thing. For some reason, I'm frozen, but I'm still talking here.
I got a little thrown off.
Sorry, you got a good pose going there. So
no, it looks like I can hold a pose like nobody else. Which occasionally, this is what you get when you're at the beach and you have your spotty internet.
Well, you're also your background also, right? We usually get coach, right. Hey, can you play that piano? And then it's kind of like, that's not that ain't what he's working with, right? So it's okay.
It's 100%, 100% the truth. Before we let you go, can you give us a rundown of the camps that you guys have coming up? That way, any prospects that hear it,
anything you want to plug, Coach, go ahead. Feel free.
Yeah, so we have camp this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and registration gets started at 8 a.m. We take walk-ups, and then we have 3 in July 11th, 13th, and 14th. Obviously, the FCS you're allowed to have camps in July. Love to get a bunch of guys from the area up to camp, the thing for me is like I don't care where you're from in the country. I'm looking for the best players. I'm not tied to necessarily any specific area. It's about finding the best players that are going to fit our culture. So anywhere you're coming from, doesn't matter to me as long as you can you be a great fit here and help us win games. So hope to continue to get more guys up here. We had a great first camp, and the one thing I'll say is it's not just just doing combine stuff. You're going to get coached here. You're going to get coached hard, and you're going to leave here a better player that'll ultimately help your team have more success in the fall.
Right.
And to me, that's real important as a head coach. That's the experience they get.
Right. And I think that's awesome, Coach. That's totally a different, even just by saying that, that's a different approach, because I think a lot of these guys just go to these college camps and they think, hey, I'm here to run a fast 40. I got to jump far. Right. I got to crush my shuttle. And then I got to perform, one-on-ones and whatnot. And then ultimately I'm here so I can get a scholarship, when in reality, guys, I think, need to look at this really more like a little bit of a different way and say, hey, look, I can go get coached up by some high level college coaches. And even, yes, I'm trying to get a scholarship, but I can also take something back to my team that I learned, or that I took away from it, and use it now to get better tape ultimately. And I think if guys would look at it like that, I think maybe you would have a little bit of a different camp attitude, I guess is the right way to put it.
I like the fact that the individual camps.
I love that.
I know the mega camps are big things now, but I like the individual camps. You get to build that relationship with the players.
Personable.
Yeah, it's not quite as many kids. You don't have to
You're not just a number.
Right. You don't. Or there's all the tallest kids. I guess you should be talking to those guys.
Right. Yeah.
And there's all the fastest kids. I guess you should be talking to them. And as opposed to, you could really spend time with the guys at your own camp and get to know them, and they're on your campus, right? They're seeing.
That's the biggest. You can see what's here, man. Like, this is, you're gonna have a lot of time where you're walking across campus doing other things, like away from the facility. Like, you got to know that.
For sure.
Coach, thanks again for coming on.
Awesome.
Taking your time to come on with us. I want to tell you before you go, even though I'm frozen, you broke the record for the most consecutive viewers at one time. So it's like
nice.
It tracks how many.
That's awesome, Coach. That's good stuff, man. That's good stuff.
1,600 consecutive. So like at any one moment, you're averaging throughout the podcast over 1,600 people every second watching between Twitter and YouTube.
There you go, Coach. People want to hear what you have to say, man.
We had good content. I guess.
What can we say?
we had great content. It's really
phenomenal.
It's really interesting to get an insight as to what goes on, in the program, and obviously Harvard's a fantastic place. We wish you so much success, and maybe
get it, Coach.
Maybe after the season we'll have you come on and break down some X's and O's. We don't want to give them all away right now.
Hell no.
That's a good call. I'm all for it for sure.
We'll do that.
Harvard Thank football, you guys. Baby.
Thanks so much, Coach. Have a great weekend.
Coach. Thanks, man.
You too. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Take care, guy.
All right. You'll be talking to Frozen me for a couple of seconds here, but that was great podcast. We set a new record. I don't know. Usually when I go Frozen, Derek, I come right back, but it hasn't.
You're at the beach, bro. Who cares? You're at the beach. Now you get to get off. Walk a block. Go enjoy yourself. Listen, I think that was excellent in the fact that a lot of people look. We do this so that people can start to understand just the whole recruiting process and how things work and all that other kind of stuff. And especially now with the way it's changed so recently and whatnot. But that being said, now you talk about even just the Ivy League recruiting in general is extremely different. It's always been different. The way they approach things, all of that kind of stuff, what you can do at those schools, what you can't do, NIL transfer. I think this was phenomenal for people to really start to, grasp. And now they can go do their homework on their own and understand really what the Ivy League really is all about. Because, a lot of these guys, not only is it high academic, but it's good football, man. You can't, you heard him reel off all of those grad transfers that are now going, Power 4 schools. That just goes to show you the type of ball that's being played, along with all of the other stuff that you can get from going to an Ivy League school. I think it was absolutely tremendous.
Yep. And by the way, I think once you get the only thing that your new mic is way better. The only thing is, I know you fiddle, but you don't, as long as you don't fiddle too much, your new mic is fantastic. Unbelievable.
Well, I got to work on some of like it's not. I think it's like some of the wiring too. I think with my headphones. And stuff.
It might be
I got to get some
wiring,
of that.
right?
But yeah, it's
fantastic.
listen, $15, baby. Timu.
Support China.
Sorry, I'm an advocate, especially after last night watching that debacle. My goodness, I don't even want to get into it. Sorry, can't. Sorry, guys, sell out. It is what it is. Hey, maybe if the other guy gets in, we'll make America great again. I don't really know, but who knows?
I posted the funniest thing, and
after last night, I just can't. Even my wife, and God bless her soul, I love her to death, but she is, ladies and gentlemen, not an academia or any of those natures. She is so good at what she does. But when it comes to politics and that type of stuff, when she expresses a certain attitude or a feeling about watching something on TV about, that's the guy that leads us. Like now I know, wow, that must have been something on a different level. But if nothing else, last night was a learning experience for a lot of people watching certain things.
Oh yeah, it was wow.
And it correlates, right? Because here we are talking to a guy from Harvard that's produced the most presidents in the history of whatever. So hey, here we go.
Right. There's no doubt about it. I thought that was a fantastic insight and podcast, and really got to understand some nuances of Harvard. And I think it was great getting him on too. He's a first mover kind of guy, which I really like. And
right. And he's trying to do some things different within the recruiting process that some other, you heard him talk numerous times about trying, kind of getting the Ivy League up to pay. Hey guys, they've been doing this at other places and other leagues and whatnot. We got to kind of follow suit and go. And so I think he's going to be a trendsetter in that way. And I also think, look, personally, I think he's one of the smartest moves ever. He kept his DC, he kept his OC. They've obviously been doing things the right way. So now I'll come in and I'll put my own little spin on things, but you guys do what you do and I'll handle all the other stuff. Right. So, there's going to be change, but I don't think there'll be much change at Harvard. I only see them continuing to just get better and better.
There's no doubt about it. And I think, he really covered a lot of the bases there. I think I'll tell you what was insightful. It's really a tribute to Schiano. I didn't expect the answer. I thought he was going to say, I would expect from most Ivy League coaches, that, hey, these guys pick things up quicker. That tells me that Schiano obviously at
high level
has not just high level athletically, but they're decent.
That's what I mean.
I bet you if you went, I'm not making fun of some of the schools, but there's some schools.
Some guys are football factories, man. Class comes second, right? You heard him literally talk about, no, my guys are, these. The thing that tells me that the academic matters is the variety of majors that he referenced across his roster, in terms of hey, these guys are, asking these questions. Yes, I'm coming to Harvard, but what's my major and all these other things. And he just talked about time. Right? The ability to schedule things at certain times where, if you're at Harvard, man, academics are coming first. You ain't missing class for practice or any of that kind of stuff, right? This is what comes first. And him getting in on that early with these guys, talking about, hey, I'm going to recruit you from when you're a freshman because that's what need be. Because if you get a 3.0, you might already be off the board just by default. So, you know what I mean? I think it's just a whole different process. If you want to go to Harvard and play football, man, that stuff starts in 8th grade.
I think, 100% right. I think that'll be really cool. And,
which is, I think, he talked about, all right, this is my daily schedule. Majority of it is based on recruiting. And I can totally understand that too, because, he's also geographically, right? Harvard's national, right? So he's recruiting across the country, right? You bring up Harvard to a kid on the West Coast, that's now something they have to, in my eyes, take a look at no matter what.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. It's really, really cool, unique situation. Obviously, he's following a guy who, in Ivy League.
Yeah, and that's tough, but I embrace the fact that he wanted that smoke,
yes.
right? He's hey, let's go, man. Like, I'll take over after the guy and I'll be this guy. I don't need to be the next one, right? Like, because that's what we always say, right? Like, I don't want to be the guy that follows him. I'll be the next one.
Right. No, there's no doubt about
it. Good
it.
for him, man. I hope it works out, man. I'm rooting for him. That's for sure.
No, I think he'll do well. And having interacted with him a good amount when he was at Rutgers and
yes,
and at Princeton a little bit, but mostly Rutgers.
Well, a lot of these guys that we talk to, right, that have come from, and you think about his path, like he's been in the NFL, like he was at the highest level. That wasn't for him. He didn't like that. The fact that, the relationships, guys get cut the next day. It's a business, right? So he understood and identified that he was a college guy. And ultimately, hey, I want to be an Ivy League guy, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. That's what Murphy's approach was. He wanted to be an Ivy League guy, and he had a lot of success. And I think
to those guys, man.
Yeah, he's going to have the opportunity to even go to a whole different level. So.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, absolutely, man. All right, well, let's get off this, and then by the way, I think the format of the short format
is better. Might be better.
It might be better just because even though I'll watch a lot of stuff on my TV for YouTube,
other people don't.
My guess is most people watch YouTube on their phone or
100%.
And it's probably easier to watch it in the long form, especially a podcast, because it's just three people talking. It's not like
right. And for the most part, sometimes, like, I know for me, like, I put on a podcast, whether it's, visual or just audio, like when I'm driving or doing something like that, right? Like, so now you can kind of do that type of thing. Like, I don't know. Hey, whatever. We'll try it out. We'll see how it works, and we'll be good to go.
Well, it smashed our continuous viewers. And I'll tell you this. Obviously, our YouTube is really popular, and that's growing really fast. But the Twitter, combined with me and you putting on our Twitters, it's like it crushes, dude. It literally, we walk out between our two feeds, 10,000 views at the end of the podcast.
Right
at the end of the
podcast. I think it also credits the people that are actually actually watching this and like seeing what it is, and especially when it's because I think there's such a variety that we do across the board from, the guys that we bring on and the questions that we ask, we always kind of bring it back to recruiting and that, but we also touch on so many other things with so many different guys from so many different walks of life and whatnot. I think that appeals to a lot of people. They're like, oh, I wonder what the hell they're talking about today with, we see this guy that's coming on, but what the hell are they going to talk about with him, right? It's not your it's not your generic same type of questions with everybody. So I think that's an appeal.
Coaches, we're pretty smart guys. We're able to move with what our guest is and
adapt or die, baby. Adapt or die.
Adapt or die. All right. Well, I'll let you go.
Have a good weekend, everybody. We'll see you guys next week.
You got it. Let's get out of here. Normally I'm ready with the banner, but I wasn't.